Alright, I played some video games in 2022, much like I did in 2021. And much like in 2021, I've decided to make a very low effort video about some of the ones that I thought were neat. Um, so low effort, in fact, that I didn't even bother putting the sheet up that I did last year. And so you can just see that box of granola bars there. And that's okay. And yes, there is a big glare in the reflection of the light in the TV, and I'm aware of that, and it's annoying because I have to turn off the overhead light anytime I'm playing on the TV. Um, so, as with last year, these are some games that I thought were neat. They're not necessarily the best games of the year or even my favorites. They're basically my favorites. And they are most certainly not ranked. And I'm very much trying to keep things on the positive here. I want this to be a video that celebrates games that I enjoyed rather than a video that puts down games that I didn't enjoy. So, with that in mind, let's start with uh, a game that reinvigorated my hope for the Pokemon series. Was the most exciting and interesting and novel and refreshing Pokemon game in the past 10 years or so, basically, since Black and White. Um, Legends Arceus rips ass, my guys. It's so good. It is in a game franchise that had gotten so very formulaic over and over, and it had always been a formulaic, but was really feeling it in the past decade. Legends Arceus was a game that decided, hey, let's actually try to have a coherence and synthesis between our mechanics, our story, and our atmosphere and our thematics. And the result is a really refreshing, really fun game. Um, Obviously, it can't go necessarily as far with those thematics as maybe I would like to see them do because this is a children's franchise and talking about the cultural genocide of northern Japan in the wake of westernization. A little heavy, um, but there's some good subtext with you being part of the Galactic Patrol team or whatever, the expedition team, um, implying that hey, you're sort of the baddie here. Your main task here is to facilitate the industrialization of this area and ultimately subjugate the native inhabitants with your Western technology. Um, it's it's also just really fun to play. It's a checklist game, and some people hold that against it. I really love checklists, and it's a fun checklist to fill out. So uh, I really, really hope that the people who created that game are allowed to continue to make creative swings in that regard going forward. Um, Speaking of franchises that have iterated upon the same mechanical and thematic ideas for over a decade, Elden Ring came out, and it also is really good. Uh, I played through it twice. First playthrough was 120-hour completionist. Second playthrough was 30-hour, just kind of buzzing straight through. Um, and I think it's a really great game. I think that the open world doesn't really do anything for it. I think that everything that was interesting and praiseworthy about the open world was stuff that they were already doing in their more interconnected kind of I don't know what term people use for the kind of knotted intertwining worlds that you get in something like Sekiro or Bloodborne or Dark Souls 1. Um, but it is still nonetheless a really great culmination of all the lessons that they've learned since at least Demon Souls, possibly King's Field. I haven't played King's Field. Um, they're still playing in a lot of the same thematic area with the kingdom on that's been stagnating and is in need of a new upheaval. But they got some new imagery to work with after just absolutely needing to do something else after Dark Souls 3. Um, And I think just by the sheer quantity of game, there is a lot of lore, and therefore an average player is probably going to run into and engage with more of it. I got really into the lore of Elden Ring. Hashtag America is an ant. And I think it's also just the most approachable FromSoft has made a game by nature. And yes, maybe this is a point towards the open world of being able to go off and do something else more so than you have been able to do in any other From Software up until this point. Um, I think yes, it's longer than it needs to be, and I do still sort of mourn the loss of boss runs. You know, I've also played Demon Souls Remake this year as my first experience with Demon Souls, and those are levels, and there's a boss at the end, and if you lose on the boss, you have to do the level again, and you learn the level better, and there are shortcuts. Um, but I think From Software has shifted so much towards their own hype with regards to these epic boss fights that they just kind of wanted to shorten the amount of time after each failed attempt. And there is something lost there. But also, there's some really good boss fights in this game. So, if you've been concerned about these games being too hard and being intimidated by the player base or the marketing, I think Elden Ring is a great place to dip your toes in. I think it's the most approachable by far. Um, I loved Tunic. Tunic is sort of the indie representation on this list. If you're not familiar, it, as you might infer from the name, takes a lot of inspiration from Zelda 1, although there's definitely some Metroid in there as well. It's an isometric kind of adventure game. Um, and what its kind of gimmick is, so to speak, is that nothing is as it seems. Uh, your first impression of something will always be changed and recontextualized with knowledge that you as a player get later. And that is down to like basic mechanics. The first thing that you encounter in the game is a pedestal, and you don't know what to do with it. If you knew what to do with it, you could do something with it, but you don't know what to do with it, so you can't do anything with it until later. It's presented in this isometric fixed camera angle, um, and there will be times when you follow the path that is in front of you and you pop out a secret entrance on a screen you've already been there. And that shortcut was always there, and if you had known it was there, you could have gone in it, but you didn't know it was there, so you couldn't. And that's the game. That's the whole game. Every aspect of the game, the consumable pickups, the constructed writing system, everything about the game, you will see in a new context when you gain greater insight as a player. Um, and the greatest like extended stretch of gaming I had this year, the most thrilling, exciting gaming experience I had this year was with Tunic. It was with the solving the ultimate puzzle, the greatest spell, as it is referred to in game, um, and figuring out for myself what the game was asking me to do, and then proceeding to solve it over the course of half an hour to an hour. Um, was absolutely thrilling. It was the most hootin' and hollerin' I have ever had while looking between my monitor and a notebook over and over and occasionally writing things down. Um, I was muttering to myself, "Oh my god, I cannot believe this. This is blowing my goddamn mind." Um, it probably wouldn't have hit so hard if I hadn't figured it out for myself. Um, but holy cow, that was awesome. I loved it. The combat's all right. You can turn on the invincibility if you feel the need. That's okay. Um, quick shout out to Sonic Frontiers. I think this is I've seen it described as the best 7 out of 10 game I've ever played. Uh, I I have a soft spot in my heart for Sonic. It's a childhood franchise of mine that has always been a bit rough around the edges in the time I've been playing it. I think Sonic Frontiers hit upon something really interesting in shifting to these more open environments. In that, when you have an open world, you're always wondering, how am I going to keep the player interested and engaged in the space between points of interest? Um, Maybe, you have little Korok puzzles along the way for people to look for. Maybe you have crafting materials for them to pick up. Maybe you have the same five Pokemon copy and pasted in a daisy chain until the next location. That's your Scarlet and Violets. Um, Sonic Frontiers connects its point of interest with other points of interest. This is a platformer. And so you can just travel across the entire space through platforming and rail grinding and springs. And so, coupled with the fact that Sonic moves quickly and you're never more than like 2 seconds away from a point of interest, even on the ground, uh, Sonic Frontiers manages to avoid that downtime problem. I recognize that there's a utility in downtime and peace, um, and you can get that with the atmosphere of Sonic Frontiers in certain areas. Um, but I think Sonic Frontiers managed to adapt itself very well, making an open world platformer that is actually fun to get around. Um, Quick shout out to Xenoblade Chronicles 3. I think it's too long, um, but I think after processing it, I think that it's a good resolution to the trilogy. I have some DMs between a friend of mine and me, kind of going over how it's in conversation with Xenoblade 1 and 2 thematically. Um, I would have appreciated a game of smaller scope. There are so many like side quests and ascension quests that it's just overwhelming, and it becomes a whole lot of kind of iterating on different sides of the same thematic questions to the point of I need to move on to something else. Um, but also a game that kind of reaches its peak, its pinnacle, towards the end of chapter 5, and then continues for another 2 chapters. Um, but I'm really curious to see what Monolith does after this. It seems like they still have interest in doing more Xenoblade things, but not necessarily related to the plots of the first 3 games. I would love it if they ported Xenogears to Switch. I'm just saying. I know that's not really their call to make, but I'm trying to will it into the world. Last but not least, I want to have my yearly Trails slash Kiseki update. Last year, I had played Cold Steel, Trails in the Sky the first, and was almost done with Sky the second. Since then, I have finished Sky the second, finished Sky the third, replayed Cold Steel, and played Trails from Zero, which means I have played the entire first arc and the first entry in the next 2 arcs. Um, and going off what I was saying with Xenoblade 3 and scale and scope, I really, really liked Trails from Zero as a much smaller scope game. It is set almost entirely within a single city. There are a couple kind of small villages off to the side that you'll visit occasionally. But rather than traveling across an entire country on a globe-trotting quest, you are trying to solve the problems of this city and the unique political struggles that it faces. And you see the same characters chapter after chapter, and they go about their lives and their relationships develop, and you really, really get a good sense of the community in place, in a way that other games in the series haven't really managed to do. Um, in Kiseki, Trails has long been praised for its strong world building and the fact that each NPC is a distinct individual with their own story. This is the game where I think that is most featured, best shown off. And I'm really excited for Azure to come out and play Cold Steel 2 finally this coming summer when I have time and attention span, um, and then catch up on the franchise sometime in 2025. This is a really good year for gaming. It was a great year for anime, also, for the record, but you don't need me to tell you about that. Um, I hope you had a great year. I hope 2023 treats you well. And as I said last year, I'll say it again, be good to yourself.